Hi there. Happy Wednesday. I hope you all are doing well um, this week and today in particular. So, I mentioned in the caption for this conversation that earlier this year, it's only February, so not that much earlier this year, but a few weeks ago, I was I was asked to give a talk for this group, and the organizer of the event asked me to choose any topic that I wanted to, but the goal was to share words of wisdom, and specifically words of wisdom in regards to my professional trajectory and any ideas or concepts that I've found helpful on my professional journey. Excuse me. So I tried to think about, that's such a broad ask, and I could have taken that in so many different directions. But I tried to think about some of the core elements have that I think have been most integral to my professional trajectory and also to my personal life in general, which I don't necessarily think of those as two completely separate, mutually exclusive things. And I know that a lot of times people talk about self care and an emphasis on self care. But in addition to the importance of self care, there were a couple of other concepts and ideas that kind of floated to the top for me that I wanted to create a conversation around for that particular roundtable session that I was hosting. What I didn't get to do was dive in depth about how those same three concepts um, not only impacted me or continue to impact me on a professional level solely, but also specifically on a business level when it comes to back in 2017 when I first started freelancing and on down the line as my career, as my business kind of grew and blossomed. And so I want to talk about that today because I think it will help shine some light on some of the ideologies that I think are helpful for freelancers in general. And for a lot of you, I know that you are considering going into freelancing, whether it's freelance health content writing or any other type of freelancing. So I figured it might just be helpful to share some of these thoughts here. So hopefully this is a valuable conversation for you. And of course, as always, if you have thoughts that are on your mind or on your heart, you can feel free to drop those in the comments. I love for these to be more people discussing than just me. So feel free to throw your comments and thoughts out there as well. For those who don't know me, I'm Megan Freeland. I'm a public health pharmacist turned health content strategist. And I also run the Health Professionals to Health Writers program, which primarily focuses on helping pharmacists and other healthcare professionals learn how to replace a portion of their primary income through freelance health content writing, which is why we are talking about self-trust, self-awareness, and self-care in the context of how it is beneficial and why it is essential for freelancers, especially freelance health content writers. So if we haven't met before, feel free to introduce yourself in the comments. I would love to get to know you a little bit better. In the meantime, we can go ahead and dive in. So, just to give some background, make sure we're all on the same page here, I can share a little bit about how I think of these three concepts. So, starting with self awareness, I really think of self awareness as your knowledge of and understanding of yourself and how you operate. Um, and not just yourself and how you operate, but then how that is perceived in the world. So, self awareness is kind of a dual concept because it's about your awareness and understanding of yourself, but it's also about your awareness and understanding of yourself in relation to the external world. So, to other people and your external environment. So, self awareness, knowledge, and understanding of yourself. Self trust is kind of your relationship with yourself, and then self care is respect for yourself and caring for yourself, not just physically, but mentally and psychologically and emotionally, spiritually, all the other leaves as well. I think oftentimes we kind of have a superficial view of what self care is, but really it goes beyond the physical and the superficial, and is really about how you respect yourself and how that respect manifests. So, self-awareness, self-trust, self-care. As far as self-awareness goes, I was actually scrolling LinkedIn the other day, and Erin Edge, who is the editor-in-chief for Healthline.com of Healthline Media, um, she posted a very short video of her giving some advice to a group of people. And the first thing she said in that video was to set yourself up for success. First and foremost, know yourself. And I was so excited when I heard her say that. I left a comment on this post as well. I was excited because my advice, I'm one of those people who hates giving advice, to be completely honest, because I feel like all advice that you apply to your life has to be filtered through your own lived experience, right? So I never want someone to take what I am saying and just blindly follow that information. I always want them to think about themselves and understand themselves and whether or not, based on what they know of themselves, this advice is relevant to them. That's how I operate. That's how I process advice. And I think that that was an excellent quote that kind of summarizes what self-awareness is and why it's so important to set yourself up for success. First and foremost, know yourself. As a freelance health content writer, I can say that self-awareness is really important because when you're working as a freelancer, it's very different than being in a traditional employer-employee situation that many of us are used to. There is a lot more freedom and a lot more space, which sounds attractive and is attractive, but can also be a little bit debilitating if you aren't used to having that much freedom and space to direct your own path. Um, I think about it like sometimes at home, I'm just at a point where like I don't want to make any more decisions. Somebody tell me what to do and I'll go do it. But I don't want to have to be the one to decide the things, right? And when you're a freelancer, especially if that is your sole source of income, or any type of other business owner, it's you making the decisions all the time. And so self awareness is really key because you have to understand how you operate under certain conditions and in certain environments so that you can optimize your output, right? So that you can be as productive as possible or effective as possible or as efficient as possible. And a lot of times it's you that is creating the environment that you are within. So I'll give you an example of that. At a typical job, you might be expected to come into work at a certain time, stay there for a certain duration, and then leave at a certain time. That decision might not be yours to make. That might be a time of day or a duration that is set by a supervisor or a manager or whomever. Well, as a freelancer, especially if you're doing this full time, you more so have the power to decide what time you're going to start working, how long you're going to work, what projects you're going to work on, what projects you're going to prioritize, what projects you're going to say no to, how long you're going to work, when you're going to clock out, if you clock out at all, right? And these sound like very minute details, and to an extent they are. But when you are responsible for making all the decisions around the minute details, that adds up very quickly. So it's as simple things as like knowing what time of day you operate most optimally in. I know that certain times of day it's best for me to just check email, right? Like that's something I say for times of day when I'm very low energy. I know that I'm most productive in the mornings. I know that there are certain days of the week where I don't like to have meetings because my energy for meetings is not there. I know that sometimes I need to be outside of my home in a different environment. The pandemic made that really difficult, y'all, because I'm a person who kind of soaks up the atmosphere. So at times I cannot be productive in the house. Like I need to be outside or at a coffee shop or something. Um, how you spread out your projects, especially if you're working on a long-term project. So knowing, like, are you a person who needs to front load your work so that you don't put everything off to the end and end up procrastinating and rushing? Or are you someone who needs to give yourself a more narrow amount of time, even if you have a wide range of time, so that you can pump things out more efficiently? Like, all of these ways of setting up your work and your relationships and your environment, all of these are directly related to your self awareness, because you want to set up all of these things in a way that helps you perform the best. So that's kind of a perspective on why self-awareness is so important as a freelance health content writer, or like any type of freelancer or business owner, honestly. Okay, so that's self-awareness. Self-trust, again, your relationship with yourself. And a really important element of self-trust is also self-confidence. Um, One of the ways that I think is helpful to describe this point is, a lot of times we have trouble, we trust in other people to get things done, but sometimes we have trouble trusting in ourselves to achieve a certain goal, or to learn a new thing, or to execute well. It's easy for us to put that trust in other people, but then sometimes when it comes to putting that trust in yourself and believing that you have the capacity to achieve those same things, or like achieve different and but equally great things, then sometimes that trust can falter. Other times, a lack of self trust manifests as constantly seeking external advice and validation. I'll say that again. A lot of times, self trust manifests as constantly and continuously seeking external advice and external validation. Now, this is not to say in any way that you shouldn't seek advice from trusted advisors, friends, loved ones, colleagues. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that when it comes to the point where you are consistently going outside of yourself for advice, and you're also using that as an excuse to delay or put off making decisions that only you have the power to make, that might be, I'm not saying it definitely is, but it might be um, a lack of self trust showing up. Because a lot of times when we're constantly seeking advice from other people, it's because we don't trust what we already know internally. And we're scared to act on what we already know internally. So we're seeking external validation of what we already know, so that we feel more comfortable following the advice of someone else rather than following the advice of ourselves. I'm just going to let that sit there for a moment. And I want to emphasize that, like, I'm also talking to myself, right? Like, these are not things that these are all works in progress. Self trust, self awareness, self care. These are all evolving works in progress for all of us. So, at some points in time, we may be doing great on all three of these things. At other points in time, we might need a little more practice or a little more support. But speaking of practice, one of the things that I really love about trusting in myself is that self trust breeds more self trust. So when you trust yourself to make decisions, to make smart and informed decisions, and those decisions have positive consequences, that's like a positive feedback loop, right? Because you see the positive outcome that affirms that you took the information that you had and you made the best decision that you could make at the time, and things worked out well. And that gives you the confidence to, next time you confront a problem that you have to solve, to again trust in yourself, right? And as that happens time and time again, that confidence grows, and your ability to more easily trust in yourself also grows. So, like, out of all three of these things, self awareness, self trust, self care, I would say self-trust has probably been one of the most critical in my professional trajectory and in my business experience as well. I've talked about this recently through the Creator Accelerator program, some content I created there, but I talked about how during pharmacy school, I was constantly being pushed to do a residency. I mean, constantly, even though everyone I interacted with knew that I had no interest in practicing pharmacy in the traditional sense, that I was 100% committed to public health and did not need a residency for that. Everybody kept trying to push me to do a residency. And I held true to what I knew to be true because I trusted in myself. Now, it wasn't blind, right? I wasn't just being naive or dismissive of mentors and people around me who had my best interest at heart. I was listening to that information, processing that information, reflecting on that information. But at the end of the day, I knew that it was me who had to live with the consequences of whatever decision I made. And so I made an informed decision based on what I knew to be true of myself. There's the self-awareness piece. And I made the right decision for me. And I have never regretted that decision, not one day in my life. And that gave me the confidence to continue trusting in myself over and over again. So self-trust is key. The last thing, self-care, respect for yourself. And when I say respect for yourself, I don't mean I don't mean self-respect. But what I mean by respect for yourself is in the same way that we often prioritize other people in our lives, whether that is a romantic or platonic partner, whether that is a child or children, whether that is a job, whether that is another family member, whether that is a friend. As much as we are always there for other people, sometimes I think it could be easy to kind of slip up when it comes to being there for ourselves. And that's something that I learned very early on in my freelancing journey that is a recipe for disaster. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, the Journey to Launch podcast by Jamila Souffrant. And I don't remember what episode it was, but I remember her talking about something that she learned when she first started out in her business, which was that as a solo business owner, like running a business where there's just one person, and that person is you essentially are the business, right? So if you go down because you're sick or you're burnt out or any number of things, you're not taking care of yourself, then the business also goes down, which means no money is coming into the business. So it is extremely important, she emphasized in this episode, to make sure that you are taking care of yourself, of your physical, of your mental, of your spiritual, of your emotional, et cetera, et cetera. And I kept that, I've always kept that in heart. I probably listened to that like 4 years ago, but it's always stuck in my mind because it's so true. And so as a freelance health content writer, especially if, again, this is your sole source of income, it's really important to make sure that in addition to doing great work and being a great partner, being a great friend, being a great parent, being a great person, it's also important to be good to yourself. And not only does that mean like making time and space for taking care of your mind and your body, it also means respecting yourself enough to keep promises to yourself. My business coach talks about this a lot, about keeping promises, not just to other people, but to yourself as well. So when you make certain commitments or decide to do certain things, making sure that you actually follow through with those things, not just because you promised it to someone else, but because you promised it to yourself. So that's kind of the way that I think about exercise, for example, right? I treat exercise like an appointment with somebody else. I am not just going to like randomly cancel an appointment with somebody else. at the last minute for no reason with no notice. I need to treat myself with that same respect, which means that if I have set this appointment with myself to move my body, I need to keep that appointment with myself, right? That's just a small example of what I mean by respecting yourself just as much as you respect other people. So I hope that this was helpful, and that you can see kind of how these concepts are really relevant as in my own personal trajectory as a freelance health content writer and on into the owner of a health content marketing company, and how they could be really helpful for you if you are considering going into freelance health content writing as well. If anything from this conversation resonated with you, feel free to drop that in the comments. I would love to hear what was most important for you in this conversation. Before I log off, I will also share that today is February 9th, and next week, applications for the next round of health professionals to health writers applications are going to open up next week, but they're only going to open to folks who are on the wait list currently. So if you are not on the wait list yet, and you would like to be, go ahead and leave a comment that says wait list, and I'll make sure to reach out to you to find out if the program might be a good fit, and then make sure to get you the link to sign up for the wait list. And thank you so much, Siobhan. I really appreciate it. And also make sure to do that as soon as possible, because again, the wait list will be opening up to folks on sometime next week. I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to talking to y'all soon. Have a good one.